you're a pioneer because you were one of the first openly queer comics.
I just
in
got a
America.
picture of me in a covered wagon, you know, churning
days,
butter,
But
being
it
a
kind of
pioneer.
was the Wild West, wasn't it, for those days in the 80s?
It was completely the Wild West in the 80s. If you were a stand-up comic. It was at that time, and still to this day, stand-up comedy is sort of the last bastion for the straight white male. You know, it's like they still rule that world and run that world. And if you buck it in any way, you get a sidelong glance. So as you can imagine, we're talking about 30 years ago for me, walking around screaming dyke at the top of my lungs and queer, and they didn't know what to think of me.
Had you been living out, you know, for a long time?
Oh, was I out? Oh, I'd been out forever. Please, look at me, like I could be in. You know, what am I going to do, walk up on stage and talk about my boyfriend? It's like, you know, that's not going to work.
So
know,
everything...
Who's her boyfriend, Nathan Lane? You know, it's not going to work, yeah.
So what I mean is, so everything about your adult life was open and upfront about who you are and what you are?
Yeah, yeah. I made that choice very early on. And at a time when people weren't making that choice in my generation. You've got to remember that I look much younger than I actually am. I'm 60 years old. So people in my generation weren't generally out in the way that I was out. And I made that decision because I knew that I wanted to look in the mirror when I was brushing my teeth every morning and like the person that I saw. I wanted to like myself, and I knew that I had to behave in a somewhat integrous manner. And not even somewhat, just, you know, look, it's about accepting yourself and being who you are. Speaking of changing the world, that's probably the first step to changing the world.
So what age were you when you announced to the world your sexuality? And what were
I was
your parents like?
17 or 18 years old.
Okay.
Oh no, I waited a minute to tell my parents. Everybody else knew. In fact, I was a professional out-dyke comic.
Before your parents knew?
For 10 years before I told my parents. See, we've all got that inside us, right? But yeah, finally I went, you know, Lea, you're supposed to be this big out, fat dyke. Why are you not telling your parents? So I told them.
How did that work? How did you actually manage that?
It was kind of rough because they were Italian Catholics. Do you know what I mean? My parents were very, very Catholic, and the basis of the Catholic faith is that if you ignore something, it'll go away. That's basically the entire premise that the religion is based on. So when I came out to my parents, we went through the whole Italian thing, the screaming, the yelling, the throwing things, and then a month later they forgot about it and we had to do the whole thing again.
But how did they not know if you were a comedian?
How did they not know? Oh, we were in
let alone what you looked like, or, you know, I mean,
we were in two different areas of the world. So where I was doing comedy wasn't anywhere near them. So it wasn't like they could come see my comedy show. And yeah, so
and it was before the internet, so you could get away with these
there
things.
was in the 80s. There was no real internet to speak of, and so yeah, so there were they didn't see any reviews, they didn't see anything, so they didn't know what was going on. When it became apparent that I was about to break in a big way, I went, well, maybe I better tell my parents now.
But in terms of the times, I mean, there weren't that many successful female comedians, let alone.
No, like I said, last bastion of the straight white male. And interestingly enough, really almost all the female comedians who were successful were lesbians. They just weren't talking about it. Rosie and Ellen and even Lily Tomlin. Yeah, they weren't out yet. So they were all really successful.
So how did the circuit and how did TV treat you?
They treated me really well. I mean, I can't complain. They could only be where they are. You know, like most of the world, it can only be where it is. And so I knew that once I did the Arsenio Hall show, and once Hollywood would find me, that I would spend my life playing PE teachers and police lieutenants, which is kind of basically what I did. But I also got that lesbian who inappropriately hits on every straight woman at every function. Like I did that one too. I did it on Friends. I did it in the First Wives Club. I did it in so many different things until I said, no, I'm not doing that anymore. So, I mean, they weren't bad to me or mean to me in any way. They were just,
they
put me in a box just like they put everybody else in a box.
I mean, the great thing about the internet is that you can see the Arsenio Hall show. You can look it up on YouTube and watch it. But that show itself had its own controversies, didn't it?
Yeah, it was groundbreaking. It was a black man who had a late night talk show in America. That was huge. And he beat everybody. He beat Tonight Show. He beat Letterman. It was the #1 late night talk show in America, which is why I did that show. I was offered all three of them. I mean, it was like this thing happened, this feeding frenzy happened. But I was offered all three of them, but I chose that one because it was the #1 show.
You came out and upset the lawyers.
Yes. I love that. Like, before I went on, first of all, I had cameras with me too, because 60 Minutes in America was following me while I was doing this, because it was very groundbreaking that somebody was about to walk out on television in America and just openly say, I'm gay. It hadn't really been done. So it was really kind of exciting. So that's why 60 Minutes was following me around. So I had the 60 Minute cameras following me. Arsenio came in my dressing room. We kicked the 60 Minutes out. And Arsenio was like, he was very excited that I was doing the show. He was really excited that I chose him. He was just this really lovely man. So he calmed me down. I was nervous. But him coming in and do that, I thought, I'm going to go out there and kill it. And I did. I went out and I killed it. 4.5 minutes set, 5 minutes on the couch. And so 9 minutes in total. And somebody counted, I think it was Out Magazine, that I said the word dyke or fag or queer 47 times in 9 minutes. Which has to be some kind of record, some kind of gay Tourette syndrome record, where you just say dyke every chance you get, right? Could you pass me that? Dyke! Water, And so apparently, I did not know this. I was told this later, but apparently once we were done, and it was great. It's really magical television for anybody who watches the whole thing. Arsenio and I just loved each other, and it was all good. The lawyer went in to censorship lawyer, sat down with Arsenio and said, we can't air this because of the language she used, because I used the words dyke or fag or queer. Yeah. And, well, actually, you can say it. They were censoring me. And that's basically what Arsenio said. If she wants to call herself a dyke, who are we to tell her what she names herself? And he fought for it and got it on. And it changed my life and sort of changed the face of television in a really nice way, too.
Why do you like that word? Why do you like owning that word?
The word dyke? Yeah, well, it's a basic political tool. When we reclaim language that's used against us negatively and put a positive spin on it, we take away the power from the enemy, don't we? Call me a dyke all you want. Oh, is that an insult? Because I am a dyke. Really? It's kind of my way of, the easiest way to put this is I'm not gay as in happy, I'm queer as in fuck you. So that's kind of the way I put it.
Because the other thing about, identities, I mean, you've got a tattoo, haven't you?
Yeah, it says, I've got lots of tattoos.
Which says Butch.
But the one that says Butch, anybody that's seen Orange has seen my tattoo, that's all my ink. So yeah, it says Butch.
Why have you got Butch on your arm?
Well, I wanted it to say bitch, but it was a mistake. I've got Butch on my arm because I'm a very proud Butch. Also, I think it's really important for Butches to be visible because we live in a world that tries to make us invisible. And even within my own community,
so what is a
they
butch?
try to put us down. Well, I mean, if you're going to do the textbook definition, a butch is a woman who has a masculine appearance and dress and manner. But there's a lot more to it than that. It's sort of an old school idea of relationship in our community, but I don't think there's anything wrong with old school. And we have these things. I think my favorite joke that I ever wrote about it was, how many butches does it take to screw in a light bulb? Just one, goddammit. We're very self-sufficient. We feel like we can do everything, and we want to do everything. It's sort of like you take all the best aspects of men and put them with all the best aspects of women. That's a butch. How's that?
Yeah,
How'd I do?
It sounds great. But when you say sort of old school, do you mean sort of, gender roles?
Yeah, gender roles
within
old
a relationship.
Definitely.
So
but the modern version of us, the modern version of the butches doesn't fall so hard within these quote unquote gender roles, which are often confused with top and bottom. I mean, we live in a very confusing time right now for people. I know it. And I laugh about it all the time, and a lot of that comes down to politically correct language, which is something that, as an out dyke performer and political activist who's been on the planet for 38 years doing exactly what it is that I do, trust me, I've been involved with politically correct language. So there's a lot going on here where we don't allow people to make mistakes, And we are people, after all. We are human, and therefore we make mistakes, and we are completely and utterly influenced by the society that's around us. So of course we're going to make mistakes in any kind of new concept, anything that's new or it's happening out there. So the first thing I want to say to my brothers and sisters out there is take a fucking chill pill already. Take a chill pill. I'm looking right in the camera when I say it. Because I'm not your enemy. If I say something incorrectly, like if I mislabel you or if I use a word that you'll find offensive, obviously I didn't do it to try to trigger you. I get that it triggers you, but how about you get that I'm your family and I'm your friend? So instead of going eat immediately, how about going, listen, I didn't like that and this is why. Can you hear that? And I'll go, sure, I'll be careful around you, no problem. Do you know what I mean?
We've become a lot less forgiving, haven't we?
We're ridiculous. It's not even less forgiving. We're ridiculous. And I blame the alphabet soup on that. I honestly blame ourselves about a lot of that. You know what I mean?
Soup.
The alphabet soup, the LGBTQ, I can't. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, transsexual. By the time you're done saying it, the fucking parade's over. You know what I mean? It's like we've got to come up with some better way in which to refer to ourselves. I use the word queer because I think it's all encompassing. And I think the alphabet soup points out our differences instead of our shared oppression. And I think it's part of the reasons why we have become so disenfranchised in our, we just, fractioned off community, factioned off individuals that don't trust each other. And we need to come together as a group. This is how we affect change.
Because marginalized groups constantly talk about inclusion, but then exclude
every other marginalized group.
Yeah.
Every other marginalized group. I'll never understand it. And that's an old tool of them, you know, those people that have the power, the people that have the power and the money and the control. That's a tool of theirs. They do that. They put this stuff out in the media and in society so that we start to believe these things about each other. And we find ourselves being racist and homophobic and sexist and all because all these messages are sent our way instead of using our own oppression to think about how other people might be oppressed and then go, wait a minute, why am I pointing my finger at you instead of the powers that be? Well, the powers that be have planned that all along, man. They want us all going, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. They're bad. And if we all stood together and went, you're bad, it would be a huge change, wouldn't it?
So how important is this activism in your comedy?
It's very important. It's been my comedy from the beginning. You know what I mean? Again, as a comic, I chose to be an out dyke comic. And there were none of us, basically. There was none of us out there. So that was part of my tool is wanting to change the world, right? The first reason I did this was because within my own queer community, I saw just a tremendous rift between dykes and fags, like between gays and lesbians. Huge rift. And I just wanted to get us all in a room together, laughing. That's all. I mean, I was 22, so that to me was important, just to get everybody in a room together laughing. And so that was a first step. Now, then this was in San Francisco in 1982. So then the AIDS crisis became very real. And then my comedy changed as a result of that. So it was more than just trying to get us together in a room. It was about fighting with the government for our very lives, you know. That then changed sort of the political bent of what my comedy was. And I was heavily involved in AIDS activism throughout the 80s, you know, through the first part of the 90s when AIDS was just killing us. Just killing us left and right.
Have you always been sort of issue political or party political?
Well, I would say that I'm issue political if the issues strike me. And since there's a lot here to strike, you know, I would say that, you know, the fact that I'm white is probably the fifth thing you see about me because you have to get through the fact that I'm a woman, the fact that I'm a lesbian, the fact that I'm a butch lesbian, the fact that I'm fat. Oh, you're also white. So it's like, so I have a lot of issues that do affect me. And so I talk about those.
The political activism you're doing right now is
Trump-based.
Yeah, Trump-based.
I think maybe global society-based. I think that you're experiencing that right now with the Brexit that's going on. I see a lot of people out there in the world suddenly referring to themselves as nationalists, which is, you know, I'm pretty sure anybody calls himself a nationalist, that the Mussolini family gets a residual.
And Trump is trying to make that a good thing.
He's trying to make a nationalist a good thing, instead of, what the fascists that we all know them to be. And
do you think they are fascists? Because I did an interview with Michael Moore recently, and he has done this movie portraying Trump as a would-be fascist.
Yeah, he's a fascist.
You agree with that analysis?
Absolutely. I've been portraying him as a fascist and calling him outright a Nazi, and all his supporters that. And I've been doing that since he's been elected. I had a very unique thing happen to me when Trump got elected. This is why I know immediately what's going on in some ways, because I have a very personal history with it. After Trump got elected, I put up on my Instagram account the Leonard Bernstein quote, the very famous quote about we shall respond to violence by making art more frequently, beautifully. I'm misquoting, but I think people know this quote. By creating art more frequently, beautifully, and something, was his response. And I put that quote up, and underneath I said, or I could pick up a baseball bat and take out every Republican and independent that I see. An obvious joke, a very obvious joke. Obviously, I'm not planning on picking up a baseball bat. Obvious. I mean, this is all obvious. So this was on a Tuesday, as we know. So that went up on Wednesday. And on Thursday, Fox News took my Instagram story or picture, took it out of context, edited it, put up a headline saying Lea DeLaria threatens to hit Republicans with a baseball bat, puts a bogus story on it, and then leaves it up on their site throughout the weekend. So what happened was everybody with the name DeLaria was suddenly getting phone calls and getting death threats. I was getting death threats. My ex-fiance, we weren't even together anymore, the poor girl. She was looking for a job, so she put her telephone number up, like everybody does now on the internet. So somebody who wasn't current on the gossip of the day that didn't know we had broken up started calling her directly saying, we know where you live and we're going to come over and beat you up with a baseball bat. I mean, it was pretty bad. We got the hate crimes division. We had to pull in special detectives to get involved to find out that this was coming from the home base of the American Nazi Party. That's where basically all this was coming from. And they had organized to basically harass my family because how dare I speak out against Trump? If that isn't fascism, what is? If you threaten people with physical violence for speaking, what about the pipe bomber? If that isn't fascism, what is sending troops to the border, showing a sign of strength like that 3 days before a national election? What is that? Sounds like fascism to me.
Can you fight fascism on Instagram?
Of course you can.
The question.
You've got to fight fascism with every level that you've got. People come at me a lot because I am very outspoken. I don't pull any punches. I say what I think. And a lot of people come at me from my side and say, you're spreading hate. That's what they say to me. Yeah, it's me that's spreading hate. I'm the one. That's me. I'm doing that, not the guy that's trying to literally litigate trans people from existence. It's me that's spreading hate. It takes all of us to affect change in any way that we can. I have found in all my years that I've done a lot of good being very rageful, stomping around, screaming, using words like fascist and dyke and fuck. And I reach a group of people that you could never reach with your calm and gentle, let's access that other person. Let's talk to them. Let's find out how they feel. I don't deny your right to be there. I think you're important. But I think I'm just as important. And I'm not going to tell you to change your tactic. Don't tell me to change mine, because it's going to take all of us to bring everybody together so that we can fight the bad guy.
So in terms of the people you reach in America, are you reaching the white working class who are potential Trump supporters? Or are you a metropolitan coastal?
I'm not sure that I reach them. I'm thinking no. But I'm thinking that there are a lot of white working class people there that are borderline Trump supporters that might hear some things that I have to say in terms of how they've been put down in the world and might find a kinship with me.
And how far are you prepared to go? I mean, if you find that making people laugh.
What am I going to put on the
posting...
suicide vest? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, no, but this is the question that you have to ask all artists, don't they? When they say, "Well, I want to fight fascism." Well, how far do you want to fight fascism?
I will do it. I will pick up a gun and go into the trenches if that's what I'm asked to do. I mean, I know that sounds really bizarre, but I'm just saying that I've devoted my life to this fight. I've always been right out there saying exactly what I think. So yeah, I think I will go as far as I need to go to fight fascism. You know, a lot of people got mad at Kathy Griffith because of the decapitated head Trump thing, and I was mad at her for apologizing. And shame on everybody who said that she went too far. What's too far? I'm sorry, didn't that guy just make fun of somebody who is handicapped? Didn't that guy make fun of a Gold Star family? Doesn't he stand there and talk about grabbing women by the pussy? What's too far? Tell me what's too far. Oh, really, his decapitated head was too far? Was it too far when you had Obama hanging from a tree like he was lynched or eating a watermelon? I'm kind of done now. You know, with this really fascistic conservative environment that I have in my country that scream about their second right amendment, which is their right to own guns, because I know I'm in Britain, you know, as we have gone past our 300th mass shooting this year. Let me just have everybody let that sit in. There's been, I think I'm right when I say 308 mass shootings in 2018 in America. And they're still screaming about their right to own a gun, but they have issues with my First Amendment rights, which is my right to say what I fucking think.
So on guns, it's really interesting because in Britain, we often say, well, you know, this is just a cultural difference between us. We do not understand Americans' views of guns.
Neither do I.
You seem to be saying, yeah, neither do you. So what?
As if you will look at the statistics, you'll find that the vast majority of Americans are not pro-gun. We want this addressed. You know, again, this is why the Congress of the United States has gone Democratic in this last election. We want these things addressed that are now not being addressed. Americans are good-hearted people, usually. We are a good-hearted people. And again, I think that shows. Maybe there were a lot of people, the majority that said, I have a right to own a gun. I don't believe that many people feel that way anymore about assault weapons. I mean, honestly, that's all we've been trying to do is get assault weapons, you know? And then they always scream, well, there already is a ban on assault weapons, but there isn't a ban on semi-automatic weapons. And those semi-automatics are the ones that have information all over the internet. All you have to do is buy that and you can turn it into an assault weapon, you know? We've got to address the issue. I mean, we just had two in like less than a week.
Do you feel things are going to keep getting worse before they get better in America?
I don't know. I fear that might be true. But I like this last election that we just had in America. I like the fact that we've taken over the Congress again and the judiciary. Almost all the judges that were voted in were Democratic judges, and the governorships. All the governors, we've taken so many states as governors, and there's still fights going on. I don't know if people are aware of what's going on with the election in America, but there's 2 states that are still neck and neck fighting over who the governor's going to be. And Trump is, of course, lying, which is his tactic, saying it's us trying to steal the election. Says the guy who didn't get the popular vote in America, by the way, but we're the ones stealing the election. So I see great hope for that. I feel like that's Americans saying enough now. This is too much. We're not doing this anymore. So I'm hoping that will continue over to the next election, and then we'll we'll be president and the Senate, I think.
Let's come back to pioneering, if you like. 'Cause
okay.
The other pioneering thing you've done is Orange is the New Black.
Yeah.
And, you know, both in terms of, you know, your character, but that drama as a piece.
Pioneering.
Is definitely pioneering. What is it about that drama that is so clever, do you think?
I think it comes out of,
because it's more than just women, isn't it? It's sort of...
that's a big focus, but it's more than just women. It's also just viewing women the way women actually are. You know, it's like, when was the last time you saw a group of women in anything in the media sitting around at a table talking about something, and it's not about men, or whether or not their ass looks fat in their jeans. You know what I mean? They have a lot more to say. But again, I think that also what was good about Orange was it also gave us the idea of there but for the grace of God, which is something we've all said. We all know that, but don't think about it that often. How many of those women in prison were in prison for something we've all done? You know what I mean? And and that's a kind of the thing about prisons in America and women that are in prison in America. Most of them are drug offenses, and they're not major drug offenses. It's very bizarre. The legalization of marijuana would empty a lot of female prisons in America. But
it's hard to make people feel sorry for criminals, isn't it?
Yeah,
or to empathize with criminals.
Except there we were doing it by showing them that aspect of it. Also, just the inhumanity of the prison system, and especially the privatizing. How's that?
Yeah.
The American prison system, and turning human beings into cattle, basically, into numbers. And Orange has been very, very good about that, showing people that, and having people think about it, I think, in a different way. Instead of they're criminals, they deserve what they get.
And do you think a drama like that or sits on its own, or has it already influenced other things?
It absolutely has influenced television there and film. There are so many female-centric shows that are coming out now that it's kind of crazy, and non-white, which is, again, fantastic. I mean, again, one of the things about Orange was not just women, but it was women of all shapes and sizes, and women of all races, and trans women, and they addressed our issues, and we are seeing that in a lot of what's going on in television in America, most definitely, in Netflix, which basically is television now everywhere, and, within the film industry, we are seeing a lot of changes for women. I feel that the Year of the Woman, the Me Too, all of that has been influenced by Orange. I think Orange was the jumping point.
How do you think the queer community has been represented, if you like, in the whole Me Too movement?
I don't think the queer community has been represented very well in this particular movement. It's been an issue of mine. It's something I've talked about very, very much. And shame on you, second wave feminists, for having this conversation without lesbians. And I was disappointed in the Women's March on Washington, for example, after Trump was elected, because having the Indigo Girls sing Closer to Fine is not lesbian representation. More men spoke on that stage than lesbians. And I think that that's very telling. And I think that's because it's, again, run by the second wave feminist movement that has not been open to lesbians, has never been open to lesbians. Yeah, let me put it this way. Feminism needed a facelift in a big bad way. It didn't have a really great reputation amongst anyone. And that facelift came in the name of Beyonce. Okay, Beyonce came out there and brought in all these young, free-thinking, post-feminist millennials and women to a feminist viewpoint. I mean, it makes you crazy. It's like so exciting to see it when I go to universities and stuff like that. Then we go to do the March on Washington, and what happens? They put that in control of the second wave feminists again, and what do we get? Pussy hats. I'm like, get that pink thing off my fucking head already. How is this helping me? Pussy hats. We want a red hat that says, fuck you too. And, that's the Beyonce kind of feminist that I'm talking about. We were talking about feminism, and we were talking about the Me Too. And I feel that I've been watching it from the stage there, from the SAG Awards that I was at, from different events that I have been to, and I don't see lesbians speaking, and I don't see lesbians being asked to speak, and I don't see them talking about what happens to us in terms of this movement, how we are overlooked because we are obvious lesbians,
So is it more about prejudice than sexual harassment when it comes to the lesbian experience?
Yeah, it can be both, can't it? Because especially if you are a lovely, feminine-looking lesbian, quote unquote, we have these things all the time where people look at me and think, well, she looks like a lesbian. Then they look at my girlfriend and go, well, she doesn't look like a lesbian. What does a lesbian look like? You know what I mean? So I think that some of it becomes my experience where I'm just discriminated against, and some of it becomes the other thing too. But that's all part of it. That's all part of the Me Too movement, or it should be.
So who should be the people who are speaking out? Who aren't? Do you think people aren't speaking out?
No, I think we're not. I think we're speaking out and speaking out. We're just not asked to be speaking out on a major platform. I think they're asking other people.
You also have a view, don't you, on acting and who should, and portrayal?
Yes.
You know, a sort of straight actors playing gay roles and all of that.
Yeah, of course I do. I think it's, again, even more particular with lesbians, because if a non-trans actor gets cast in a trans world, my community goes crazy. If a straight man gets cast as a gay man, my community goes crazy. But they don't seem to care when straight women play lesbians. We've never had an issue with that. That's like the last, it's, again, part of that somewhat sexist movement.
But do you have an issue with that?
I have a major issue with that, yeah, because my roles are written, but not by lesbians. They're written by either straight women or gay men. They are then directed by straight men and portrayed by straight women. In other words, I'm being removed from my own narrative. I'd like to be able to bring some authenticity to what it's like to be a part of my life. That has to start first in the writer's room and last with the actor that's portraying it. But if all of them are straight people and non-lesbians, then who's telling my story?
So there's nothing per se wrong with a straight actor playing a gay role or vice versa, but it's just we live in an environment in which the queer experience has just been crowded out.
I would have no issue with this whatsoever if, for once, if 90% of the time, my story was being told by my people. It's not. It's 10% of the time, sometimes 5% of the time. Shame on SVU that has just written a lesbian role into their new season. Shame on them for hiring a straight woman to play that role when everybody wanted a lesbian to play that role. Shame on Dick Wolf, and shame on the producing director for making this decision. Shame on them.
But where does that sit with where we started this conversation about offense and everybody being offended with things?
Yeah.
About,
This isn't being offended about things. This is me being upset about being taken out of my own story.
Yeah,
that's not about language. That's a really big thing. I can't put this any more plainly than that. If you're telling my story and you aren't me, have no experience from being me, and no one in that community that's telling my story does, then you're not telling my story. How about having at least a lesbian consultant? If you're going to have military and you got people writing it that aren't in the military, directing it that aren't in the military, that act it that aren't in the military, you got a military consultant. How about a dyke consultant on the set? If you're going to do it, how about a dyke consultant?
You're offering yourself.
Yeah, hire me. I can tell you exactly what a dyke would do or think in that situation.
We've also got to talk about music, because that's why you're in London.
That's why I'm here to do.
You come from music, don't you?
My dad was a jazz pianist. My mother was a dancer. They met in the USO.
And so did you think you were going to be a musician before you became a comedian and actor?
I honestly have I just wanted to perform. That's the best way for me to put it. I knew that all I ever wanted to do was perform. I was in love with like Lucille Ball and Carol Burnett and the Rat Pack, and I loved John Coltrane and Ella Fitzgerald and all of that. I loved old movies, and I when my friends would be out playing whatever game they were playing, I'd be watching an old Betty Davis black and white. That's kind of I'm very faggy for a dyke. My background is very gay boy. But this is all I've ever wanted to do. So I don't know if I thought I would grow up being a musician. I knew I'd be an entertainer.
Do you get the same kick from singing as you do from comedy?
Big time. And I love, because when you see me perform, like when you come to see my show on Sunday night at the Bridge Theater, you'll see me do both. I've always done both. So you're going to see that it's primarily music. It'll be 60% music, but there's going to be 40% comedy in there too.
Your singing voice, though, is really sweet.
Yeah.
And it's different to your comedy voice, which is raucous.
When I sing jazz, it's sweet, and my comedy voice is very raucous.
So how do you explain that?
Well, if you heard me do if you saw me doing any of my roles on Broadway, you would never describe my voice as sweet. You would call me a belter. You would say she has a very show busy voice. That's what people would say about my voice. Really old school, really show busy, really belty. Jazz, it's just that's my style in jazz because I think it's important that you have your own voice in that idiom. I think it's incredibly important that you create your own sound and your own style. So that's my style when I sing jazz. I'm very, you would say, sweet. I have a smaller voice, but I also know how to sing for my uterus. You know what I mean? When it's time for me to belt, when I do like Sweeney Todd or Life on Mars or Welcome to My Party or any of those things that I do, that's, I'm accessing my gut and my diaphragm, and you'll hear that D sharp loud and clear in the next county.
We've talked a lot over the last half an hour or so about different ways to change the world. I do like to ask people what they think is the most controversial or difficult to swallow way to change the world that they dream of. Do you have one?
This is going to be very weird, I think, because this may not be the answer that you're looking for, but this is something that every human being can do. So this is why I would say that, and it's incredibly controversial in that the first thing you have to be is comfortable in your own skin. It's incredibly important. You have to be that. And in order to be that, you have to love yourself. And you have to love yourself and believe in yourself. These two things are really, really important. And then the third thing is no fucks given. If you love yourself and are comfortable in your own skin and you don't give a fuck, you can affect so much change. Personally, we can change the whole world if we all came at the world from that place. We would change everything in this planet. And I talk about this at the university level, and I'll talk about it now. These are really simple things. These are very simple things. But if you do those things, you would never be able to sit in a room while you heard somebody next to you use the N-word. You wouldn't be able to do it. You'd just stand right out and tell them and talk to them. I'm sorry, but if you're going to continue to speak like that, I'm going to have to leave the room, or I'm going to punch you in the face, whatever your style is. But it would affect a lot of change in the world. So honestly, that's my answer.